The Forest Temple is the first adult dungeon in Ocarina of Time. Serving as the beginning of Adult Link's quest, it introduces us to characters and concepts that will become integral to the rest of the game from here on out. We meet Sheik, one of the last surviving Sheikah, who mysteriously appears to give us hints and a song to teleport us back to the new dungeon for ease of travel. Also, unrelated, but there's been some confusion over whether Sheik is male or female. Regardless of what Smash Brothers told us later, Sheik is introduced to us as male and is meant to be seen that way by the player in Link. We are introduced to the concept of the sages, wise and magical people that have been chosen to help protect the Triforce and Hyrule itself. The first of these is none other than your childhood friend Saria, giving Link and the player a personal connection to the first challenge. But what of the Forest Temple itself? The inhabitants of the forest are primarily the Kokiri, a race of perpetual children. They make their homes in the stumps of giant trees and don't seem capable of construction beyond basic carpentry. Then who built the Forest Temple? For what purpose? And why is it in such a state of disrepair, as if abandoned and forgotten by its original creators? Welcome to Zeldanalysis, the mystery of the Forest Temple.
By the goddesses! I'm so excited to go on my archaeological journey to the Lost Woods so I can study the Forest Temple.
Shad, you're not going alone, are you?
Oh, heavens no!
Okay, good.
I have science and intellectual curiosity as my constant companions.
Yeah, no, I'm going with you.
Oh, Ashe, my superstitious friend, is violence the only solution you can fathom? There is no need to be afraid. With a scholarly mind and a pure heart in pursuit of only knowledge, there is nothing that can hurt. Ah! What the devil is that?
Should I pack a sword to go with your leaking pen?
Yes, please.
The Forest Temple is located deep in the Lost Woods, guarded by wolf foes and a hedge maze patrolled by Deku Scrubs. Beyond that is only one entrance through a narrow ravine. This makes for a natural choke point, though whether this is merely coincidental or by design is unclear. Either way, the temple is clearly well guarded. The entrance itself is built high up off the ground, requiring Link to use the hookshot to access it. However, a few crumbling steps connected to the entrance imply that this was not always the case. Once, there may have been stone steps leading up to the temple. Inside, the temple immediately presents us with a long hallway and a literal red carpet to beckon us in. The wooden doors, decorated with stained glass windows, resemble those of a beautiful home or church rather than that of a dungeon. Past the entrance hallway, we come upon a large, expansive lobby or foyer. There are several doors in all directions we can take, but in the center of the room waits an elevator to the basement, which can only operate when all 4 torches are lit with 4 enchanted flames. The architecture of the temple is bizarre. There are beautiful gardens with built-in streams and walking bridges, but up on the temple's high walls, we find stone battlements. Hallways are twisted and distorted, ceilings fall onto the floors and raise themselves to repeat the process. Some of the rooms seem to be built in a way that's impossible to traverse. Some even appear completely inaccessible if it were not for the clinging vines growing on the walls or the wooden ladders bolted onto the stone. The temple is simultaneously incredibly well kept, but also decrepit, with crumbling structures, hanging cobwebs, and shredded rugs juxtaposed against the beautifully manicured gardens and well-kept rugs elsewhere. The dead roam free here. Poes, Stalfos, Wallmasters, and other strange creatures occupying the space between life and death constantly accost you. The Wallmasters specifically try to kick you out. A few rooms are decorated by blank paintings, which only contain an image when a Poe hides inside of it. And down below in the basement, we come upon a strange spinning room with bars blocking the way forward, as if this were a prison. Turning the room to gain access allows us to enter a room filled with several copies of the same painting of a dark castle. It feels almost like a museum or an art gallery, with metal gates and stanchion posts with burgundy velvet ropes blocking access to the artwork itself. Nothing makes sense or seems to go together. The entire temple is as twisted and distorted as its hallways. But perhaps the answer lies not only in what we can find within the temple itself, but in its surroundings. The Lost Woods are an enchanted forest filled with both fairies and monsters. It is said no humanoid race but the Kokiri can enter these woods safely. Any non-Kokiri that enters these woods is certain to become lost and be transformed by the dark magic of the forest. Children lose their faces and become skull kids, eternal children like the Kokiri, but without the guidance of a fairy companion. Adults who become lost face an even darker fate, as they quickly perish and become Stalfos. Yet, while the Forest Temple houses Stalfos, it places a special emphasis on Pos, which we don't seem to find in the Lost Woods. Pos are mostly found in the Kakariko graveyard, showing us that the dead usually become ghosts if they're unable to pass on peacefully. Only in the Lost Woods do they become Stalfos. But if this is so, why does the Forest Temple present Pos front and center? Put a pin in that for a moment. Let's look back at the Kokiri. As we've covered, they would have lacked the ability, need, or understanding to craft the Forest Temple. As eternal children, the Kokiri have no real concept of war, and the most they craft as far as weaponry are wooden shields, most likely meant for play. That is, except for one rare treasure. The Kokiri sword. It's an anomaly, made of metal but also oddly short. The small size may lead one to believe that the Kokiri must have crafted it, as no full-sized adult could wield such a short blade as a sword. But that's assuming it's actually a sword. What else could it be, you ask? Well, to answer that, let's gather all our clues and move on to see what we can extrapolate from this information.
Dearest Ilia, as I write this, I fear we will never meet again. The Lost Woods have ensnared me, commandeering my sense of sight and hearing and turning them against me. Every step feels as if I have not moved a single pace, and yet the forest warps and wraps itself around me, altering its appearance when I stand still. I am lost, my beloved, not only in body, but in heart. For I die with the heaviest regret for never having confessed my truest affection for you.
It's this way.
What?
Yep, you can even see it from here, look.
How did you...
I asked the little imp for directions.
Hi, you gonna finish that apple?
There's a slightly obscure theory about the Forest Temple that pops up every now and then. This theory claims that the Forest Temple is a former Hylian military base. It's easy to see why. The battlements atop the walls, the strategic choke point at the entrance, perfect for whittling down an enemy army. And the very appearance of the Stalfos. Just look at them. The Stalfos wield metal shields and swords, not too dissimilar from what Hylian knights or soldiers might carry. I haven't seen anyone mention the Kokiri sword, but I think it lends weight to this theory as well. I'll explain why with a quick stupid interlude from my childhood. I remember when I was a kiddo, I attended the Highland Games, which is sort of like a Ren Fair, but specifically themed for kilt-wearing folks. One of the things they sold there were swords, and the moment I locked eyes with a sword vendor's booth, my life's mission became to get my hands on one of my own. Of course, being not only a child, but an unusually tiny runt at that, there was no way I could wield some of the Final Fantasy-esque behemoths of badassery for sale, nor could I afford it with the meager cash I'd saved up for this very event. However, after scoping the place out, I found a much smaller and affordable little sword that I instantly fell in love with. Of course, minors couldn't purchase weapons without adult permission, so I just pointed out the closest adult and said that he was my dad. The guy was an excellent sport and went along with it, confirming to the vendor that I was indeed his daughter. And I'm pretty sure that guy was Kyle Rebong's dad, so thanks, Mr. Rebong, you did me a solid. All of my classmates thought it was super cool, and we were all too ignorant to determine at the time that what I had purchased was actually a short sword at best and perhaps even a dagger at worst, including Kyle Rebong, which means his dad didn't narc on me about my mistake even to his own kid. So thanks, Mr. Rebong, you're the real OG. Kids aren't good at gauging things like this is what I'm saying. It seems probable to me that the Kokiri sword is in fact a short sword or dagger, which once belonged to a Hylian knight who succumbed to the Lost Woods and transformed into a Stalfos. The weapon was left behind and found by the Kokiri, who mistook it for a proper sword and named it as such, making it one of their great treasures. Now you might be thinking, that settles it. It's a former Hylian base. That doesn't seem so complicated. You built this whole mystery up just so you could tell us that story about you scamming a perfectly nice sword vendor as a kid. To which the answer is no. But thank you. Especially you, Mr. Rebong, wherever you are. See, While the Hylian military base theory explains a few details of the Forest Temple, it only raises more questions about some of the others. Why would Hylian soldiers construct such dangerous and even impossible to navigate rooms? Why would they build twisting corridors or decorate their doors with lovely but easily broken stained glass? Why have several copies of the same painting? And why seal the viewing gallery containing them in a basement with a spinning entranceway below an enchanted elevator? The answer being, the Hylians didn't build it. They seized it. Think back to the wooden ladders bolted onto the stone walls, looking newer than the crumbling architecture around it, and yet terribly out of place. Almost as if the soldiers put them there to give themselves access to parts of the temple they could not reach otherwise. This means the battlements were probably added by the soldiers as well, rather than being an original part of the structure. The choke point outside the temple probably wasn't added by the soldiers, but rather it was the reason the soldiers decided to settle inside the temple in the first place. It had excellent strategic value. Then what was the Forest Temple before the Hylian soldiers took it over? I believe it was in fact meant to be a home for the spirits of the dead. In that sense, the name temple is quite fitting. But this would explain so much about the Forest Temple structure. The strange, warped corridors and inaccessible rooms were built specifically so they couldn't be easily used by the living, but were perfect for spirits which can fly, climb on walls, and even live inside of paintings. The reason for such a structure to exist is simple. The Lost Woods kills people. And while children are transformed into skull kids and clearly retain their consciousness, adults seem to become nothing but mindless skeletal soldiers. Could it be that Stalfos are merely the bodies of the dead, and that their spirits become Poes? If so, the Lost Woods would be filled with vengeful and angry spirits that died before they were ready. Unless someone built these spirits a home within the woods, a place the dead could go live comfortably until they're ready to pass on. This is why there are multiple copies of the same painting. Poes can inhabit paintings, perhaps even live inside of them. These identical castle paintings are not unlike identical apartments built right beside each other. They're housing for the spirits. This explains the decorative stained glass and finely manicured gardens. It's why there's an entrance hallway and a foyer to greet you when you arrive. Perhaps the crumbling structure was a shrine to leave offerings to the spirits, most likely damaged by the Hylian soldiers when they moved in and started remodeling the place. No wonder the wall masters keep sending you back to the entrance. They're trying to kick you out of their house, especially after their past experiences with Hylians. The Stalfos you meet inside the Forest Temple are Hylian soldiers who died inside of the temple, and their bodies became just more security for the house. But if you want further proof, consider this. When you're a child, Hyrule Field is beautiful, and the only monsters you encounter are stall children at night. But when you're an adult, the hedge maze protecting the Forest Temple entrance is patrolled by moblins, signaling that Ganondorf has taken over the Forest Temple. And as a result, what do we find plaguing Hyrule Field? Several displaced and disgruntled Poes. Is it possible that Ganondorf taking over their home forced many Poes out of the Forest Temple and left them wandering Hyrule Field aimlessly? It could just be coincidence, but it seems to lend credence to the idea. Okay, so the Forest Temple was originally a house for the spirits of those that died in the Lost Woods. Then who built it? Well, there's nothing concrete to go off of. I believe the most likely candidate are the Sheikah. The Sheikah have a deep connection with the dead, as seen by their own temple, but we'll cover that in more detail in the Shadow Temple video. The ancient Sheikah were also said to have an incredible anachronistic technology, far advanced for their time, but that the height of their civilization was long ago. In the period of Ocarina of Time, the Sheikah are nearly extinct after being betrayed by the Hyrulean royal family. This would explain why the Forest Temple has fallen into such a state of disrepair. The Sheikah that maintained it and made offerings to the spirits are now long gone. Though, hold on. Then what happened to the Hylian soldiers that moved into the Forest Temple and turned it into a military base? Why would they suddenly abandon such a stronghold? If you're thinking it's because of ghosts, you're right. But if you want to hear my opinion, it wasn't just any ghost.
Incredible! This masonry is very old, pre-Hyrulean Civil War, perhaps even predating the fall of the ancient Sheikah civilization. Could it have been some kind of ceremonial grounds? Or perhaps some kind of stronghold against invasion?
It's a house.
What?
It has a living room.
My dear Ashe, that is no living room. Most likely, it's a sacrificial chamber.
It has an entrance hall so you can leave your shoes.
Well, that must serve some sort of ritual purpose, or...
Get out of my house.
Yeah!
Hello, sorry. My friend's just a nerd for architecture and he wanted to take a look.
Oh, well, in that case, okay. Don't miss the crown molding. It's still in spectacular shape for its age. Just don't touch anything. I'm having guests tomorrow.
Shad, you okay there, bud?
Damn it, that is gorgeous crown molding.
Long ago, the Sheikah built the forest temple to house the spirits of those that died in the Lost Woods. Here, spirits could find safe shelter and peace until they could sort out whatever was binding them to the world and pass on. The Sheikah brought offerings to the temple and ensured the spirits' needs were met. Wall masters received rooms built so only they could traverse them comfortably. Poes were giving paintings to live inside of. Peaceful gardens with gentle streams gave the spirits a nice outdoor space to rest in, while twisted, nonsensical geometry inside ensured no wandering stranger could invade their private sanctuary. Outside the temple, the Sheikah grew hedge mazes, and the great Deku Tree sent Deku scribes and wolfos to protect it. This way, the spirits would not be disturbed. In time, the Sheikah disappeared, and the forest temple was forgotten. Until it was found during the Hyrulean Civil War. As the races of Hyrule fought for dominance, a battalion of Hylian soldiers stumbled upon this lost temple. With its entrance behind a ravine giving it a strategic choke point, the soldiers decided to convert this place into a military base. They erected stone battlements atop its walls and bolted on ladders to help them climb the strange, unwelcoming architecture. The spirits were disgruntled, but most lacked the strength to do anything about the trained warriors living within their walls. In time, the soldiers settled into the base, and some even brought their wives to live there with them. Some may have believed it was the safest place in Hyrule. Until the men's hubris was their own undoing. For they had not been the first to attempt to tame the dark and mysterious forests. There had been another. A man from the desert. A leader of the Gerudo. Long before Ganondorf was born, a previous Gerudo king had tried to explore the Lost Woods with the intention to create a new settlement for his people. But as all who linger eventually do, he succumbed and became just another Stalfos. His spirit was riddled with remorse and full of hate for his enemies, which had forced his people onto the most inhospitable lands. So when his spirit found its way to the Forest Temple, as all spirits of the forest do, the former Gerudo king became the master of the house. The Sheikah immediately recognized the unique danger and power he possessed and strove to both please and contain him. So the Sheikah gifted the master of the house with many painted castles to live in and placed them where he would not be disturbed, in a basement beneath the temple. However, to ensure the master did not bring down his wrath upon the Sheikah who would come to bring offerings to the temple, the architects built a clever seal to keep the master from accessing the higher floors. The spinning room acted as a sort of magical antechamber, allowing the more advanced Sheikah shamans to enter and exit should they ever need to, without letting the master escape. As an extra measure of protection, the Sheikah made the elevator leading to the basement operate only when each torch was lit with a different type of enchanted flame, safeguarded by the inhabitants of the house, other Poes. But so many years later, the Forest Temple's secrets were lost to the ages, and the Hylian soldiers who currently inhabited it did not see a warning. They saw only a challenge. With enough effort, their men were able to gather up enchanted flames in bottles and light the torches themselves, accessing the elevator and the basement below. There, they puzzled out how to open the antechamber, unaware that their incorrect usage would let the master of the house go free. Enraged by the insolence of the Hylians, and already bitter for what their ancestors had done to his people, the master of the house slaughtered the Hylian intruders, their bodies becoming Stalfos that would forever guard against others who sought to do the same as they had. The master's revenge was swift and complete. Every Hylian who lived there was killed. All that is, save for one woman and her child. Her husband, a Hylian soldier, lay dead in the Forest Temple. She wasted no time, gathering up her infant son and her husband's horse, riding as far away as she possibly could from that wretched place. The woman was mortally wounded and could not get far. Indeed, when we hear of this woman in-game, many assume she came from Hyrule Castle. But who could ride such a distance with wounds such as hers? No. The woman came from within the forest, from the Hylian base within the Forest Temple, and rode ever deeper into the woods, seeking a way out, seeking safety, seeking anything that could save the life of her child. By fate or divine mercy, she found the grove of the great Deku Tree. the Hylian woman prostrated herself before the forest deity and begged for her son's life with her final breath. The great Deku Tree honored her request, not only because of the incredible courage the woman had shown, but because he sensed this boy was a child of destiny. And so, the great Deku Tree raised this boy as a Kokiri, christening him with the name Link. You may have guessed by now that the Gerudo King is probably a reference to Phantom Ganon. Why would a Gerudo King go searching for a new land for his people? See, in Wind Waker, we are told by Ganondorf that his people lived on much harsher lands, where wind itself brought death. It isn't difficult to imagine that the Gerudo may have tried to find other lands to settle, but were denied by the Hylians when they solidified their power over Hyrule. But what about what we're told about Phantom Ganon in-game? Ganondorf claims he created this phantom servant and punishes him for his failure by banishing him to the space between dimensions. Well, I don't think Ganondorf is necessarily being literal about having created Phantom Ganon, but instead that he bolstered his power and made him what he is now. So why does Phantom Ganon look exactly like Ganondorf at first? There could be a lot of reasons. The ghost could be masquerading as Ganondorf, or maybe the ghost looked inside of Link and saw his nightmare of Ganondorf riding a horse and wanted to show Link what he feared. Either way, it doesn't take long for the Phantom to show us his true skeletal face. Skeletal, like the Stalfos. And so unlike all the other ghosts we see in-game, showing us that this spirit is indeed special. As for why the paintings Phantom Ganon rides in and out of all look like Ganondorf's castle, there could be several explanations. Perhaps Ganondorf saw the paintings in the Forest Temple and decided that he wanted to build his castle to look like that. Or perhaps this is the traditional Gerudo style of castle and the Sheikah purposely painted these to be accommodating to the master of the house. Whatever your thoughts, I personally love how well this fits thematically, showing the conflict between the Hylians and Gerudo ran much deeper than just Ganondorf's ambition, and that the Hylians weren't completely innocent in the conflict. Though that much should have always been apparent, considering what they did to their faithful servants, the Sheikah. If this theory is true, then I wonder if Link felt any special affinity within the Forest Temple. Here was the true place of his birth, a blending of Hylian and the forest, a perfect representation of Link himself. And somewhere, in this mystical manor, a pair of Poes linger out of sight, looking on with glowing parental pride, as they finally can put to rest the one question that has plagued their souls and kept them from passing on to the beyond. What happened to their son?
We made it! Ah, isn't it beautiful, Ashe? The lost woods behind us, the horizon before us, and in our hands, pages and pages of notes that will serve to bolster our collective knowledge for years to come. Each of us standing on the shoulders of the scholars that came before us, lifting those that will come after us, propelling our species to newer and greater heights with every generation.
You're right. Shad, it's breathtaking. I only have one question.
Oh? Have I sparked my ever-grounded companion's imagination? Perhaps you feel growing inside of you a new thirst for understanding.
We are from Twilight Princess. The temple is from Ocarina of Time. When is this taking place?
What?
That doesn't fit in the timeline. 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 That doesn't fit in the timeline.
I see. I will have to watch you closely on your journey.
Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe if you want. Hit the notification bell if you want to know when the next video is out. Support us on Patreon to help these episodes come out. I'll see you next time when we explore the forgotten meaning of the Fire Temple. Until then, may the goddesses light your path.